Well, we're sitting in my sauna. It's currently getting up to 200. It'll still get a little hotter. Usually this thing gets up to about 210. Got the charring to prove it. Figured that we'd have a talk about the F1 XT. What it is, what it isn't. If it's worth your time. As far as light boots go, I feel like it has one of the best closures over the ankle. It also comes with a real power strap. The material feels stout. You know, people with F1 LTs have a ton of time on them, and it's essentially the same material. It is subtly different per Scarpa's website, which does enable it to be punched easier. And I'd imagine it loses a subtle amount of material stiffness, but the added buckles, the real buckles, the kind of Z wrap over the forefoot, and the power strap, I think more than make up for that as far as how it feels. They went with a very thin sole on the bottom, just after one use with a lot of scrambling in rocks. It showed quite a bit of deterioration on the edges, the kind of crumbling that those light boots are known for. As you would expect, it walks super well, no complaints there. For a heavy person like myself, I feel like I can fold the boot in half, so I really wouldn't say that you're driving with the boot. You're more kind of just sitting in the middle of the ski, not really truly using the boot for support. At least it doesn't feel like it to me. You know, they changed the rear walk mechanism, made it a little longer, which effectively adds +2 to the differing options of the F1 LT. I believe the F1 LT had options of 9, 11, and 13 off the top of my head. I could be wrong. Either way, I know it starts at 9. All the options now have been bumped up by 2. So at least off the top of my head, that would be 11, 13, and 15 degrees. Problem with that is that the boot is still so foldable that when you lean into it, it just keeps going, and then it doesn't feel natural. So I actually swapped out to the old levers, put it in the most upright position, and that's not because I like a super upright position. It's more because I'm accounting for the fact that I'm going to blow through the first few inches of lean, which is going to effectively put me at a much deeper forward lean, more like what I'm actually used to. I was able to punch it a hell of a lot more than the F1 LT, got a lot of width. My feet are quite wide. I don't know how much most boot fitters would be able to widen it, or at least how much they'd be willing to widen it, but I'm willing to just throw the heat gun at it and say fuck it, see what happens. And I've been able to get way more volume than I was expecting, which is good. You know, I've walked several miles on a rocky trail in it, like that. I mean, really the biggest difference between it and the F1 LT is that you can actually get proper closure over the ankle joint. You don't have that ridiculously high volume BOA that really only works for people with cankles. You know, you can actually feel pressure, feel like you have good heel hold. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of all I got as far as the typical bases. I wanted to call it a dull scalpel, and what I mean by that is that it's a scalpel as far as, you know, you're only going to be skiing this with super light skis. If you're skiing anything that is a little heavier, then it's going to put a lot of demand on the boot. It's going to feel floppy. I mean, sure, you could do it in perfect conditions, but typically when I'm doing adventure skiing, I don't get perfect conditions. That's not the purpose. Skiing isn't the purpose when I'm adventure skiing. And so I call it a dull scalpel because it's, there's just a certain point that you require either more overlap in a boot or more material to create stiffness. And I think that this is near the pinnacle of what that is. And so kudos in that regard. It's just, you're never going to get something that skis like a 4-buckle. So my rant against it is more of a philosophy against light boots as a whole, rather than any knock on the specific product. And if you're a light skier, you might actually find it to be adequately stiff and supportive. As far as room for improvement goes, the only really thing I can think of that will make it superior, that would increase material stiffness, would be to make the over ankle area either have an additional strap or even slightly higher. As is, it kind of sits, if you're thinking of, the joint, sorry, I'm all wacky. If you're thinking of the joint like this, when you got your ankle kind of like right there, it's a little too far forward, right? And so it's really just holding the top of the forefoot rather than truly being over that 90-degree turn, truly over the ankle joint. So in my experience, if you get something there and you really crank it down, that's all you need. And then the other thing is just material. If they extended the material slightly higher, that would allow for more material stiffness. It also would allow more material on material contact between the upper cuff and lower cuff, which also strengthens the flex. And then from a material standpoint, they could have gone full carbon in the upper cuff, made it even stiffer. As opposed to the material that they're currently using, carbon is stronger, or stiffer rather. And then the other thing is that they've been introducing it in, I believe, next year's Mistral 8 and in the current Quattro, but they have kind of like it goes right around the side of the foot and under the foot and up the other side. They've added a piece of carbon. I believe it's actually the material that's used predominantly in the F1XT itself. But if they were to use a stronger, just like pure carbon and do that wrap there, what that does is in that particular area, that's where when you flex down, the boot bellows out there. That's where you lose stiffness because of the bellowing. And so by putting a stiffer material in that U shape around the center of the foot, when the shin comes forward, the boot doesn't have as much ability to bellow. And particularly you run some sort of strap right over that U-shaped piece of carbon, and then you have something that materially is going to resist bellowing out, and then you have a strap that's going to counteract that. That would make the boot better for larger skiers. Wouldn't feel like you could just lean immediately through the boot. If you don't care for a super responsive flex and you don't mind like kind of a bouncy feeling soft flex, then sure, like there's nothing wrong with it. Or if you're lighter, but for a heavier skier, I think they're going to want something more responsive. Otherwise it feels like you're just never finding the cuff, when in reality you're just pushing right through it. So all in all, a definite improvement over the F1LT. Like I said, the use case scenario for me is at least extremely narrow. If proper skiing is on the menu, I'm still going to be bringing a burlier boot because I like skiing. Really, it's only for exploration.